Happy Wednesday, aka NVIDIA's earnings day after close. Welcome to Mind Over Matter, the psychology of trading. This is a weekly session that we do talking about struggles that we've had as traders, but that we also see our traders having in the current market conditions. And so we always try to think about, what we're seeing people struggle with, what the posts are about, but more importantly, things that we're experiencing and that we have experienced in the past when we were newer traders. The idea is to help you guys through the process, that evolution from being an emotional roller coaster all over the place to recognizing what the emotion is and going, hey, I know you, and not letting it derail your entire trading world. And there can be a lot of equivalents drawn to toxic personalities in your life, being able to hold your space, hold your boundaries, and still do what you need to do while emotional things happen. So it's really important that we're thinking about ourselves not like machines, but as humans that have ego and emotion attached. And we have to be able to recognize it and not allow the ego and the emotion to run our trading portfolio, because that's what happens. Anybody who's in trouble knows heart rate was up, palms are sweaty. You just said, oh, I give up. FOMO kicked in. It's all driven by that emotion. So I need to check and see if Shadow's around, I guess, before I get too deep into this.
I am
Okay, awesome. How are you?
doing good. How about yourself?
I'm awesome. I'm really happy. Went back to trading futures a couple years ago so that we can actually take advantage of the price moves when they happen, sometimes outside RTH. And just saying, just putting that in there. We were discussing in Market Talk a little bit earlier about there are a lot of traders who actually use my ES for SPY trades, even if I'm not trading. So typically I trade them in tandem, but am not trading SPY right now because of the current market conditions, because we're in this weird place. And that goes back to emotion as well, right? We think about what has worked in the past and we tend to have this attachment to, oh, this thing worked well before. And one of my favorite sayings is, it never is what it never was. So just because it worked before doesn't mean it will work again. Just because it didn't work before doesn't mean it won't work now. So we have to be flexible, and it's rigid with our rules and flexible with our expectations. I probably should look at overhead. Okay, Anchored VWAP is sitting just above us, 53.41, if you guys are getting worried about that long. So up decently in that long position. Because I'm talking, make sure that you're managing your trades. You're not waiting just on me, because I'm also going to be talking and looking back and forth. I don't like trading when I'm doing these, but it is what it is. That was my setup I've been talking about all morning, that look below and fail, or the LBF. So that constant adaptation to what the changing environments are in the market, you start to build a mental profile about, I've seen this type of price action before, I've seen this type of market movement before, structure before, and history does not repeat, but it oftentimes rhymes. And you hear people say all the time, history repeats itself. It doesn't, but it does very often rhyme with itself. So looking for things like a profile of types of behaviors out of the participants in the market can help, I think, temper that whole concept of we're at all-time highs. NQ just made two, new all-time highs today on low volume. It has to be weak. It has to sell down because it's low volume. No, we're in price discovery. It doesn't have to do anything. If I could tell you how many times I watched people blow their accounts through the years saying it has to because it's low volume, it would be a lot. Like a lot more than I know that are successful traders, significantly. So you want to be really careful thinking that you know what's going to happen. Study the patterns, study what human nature tends to do, because human nature is what ultimately drives the whole back end of this thing, which is what drives greed and FOMO and all of that. So even though we're trying not to let our operates run our accounts, other people are. Other algos are programmed around certain key reactions and keywords and things like FOMC. And while we've got the minutes today and it's not the actual speech, those algos are programmed to look for frequency of words, certain types of words. Here's our tag of anchored view op right here. A little bit of selling front running that, but I'm still in my position. So I wanted to talk about rough patches. Everyone, I mean, literally, I do not know a single trader that has not been through a rough patch. So anybody that tells you that they just learned and whew, things were good is lying. Flat out, they are. Now, I might meet someone in the future, so I always go most of the time. But in the 22 years I've been trading, I've never met someone that's like everything's perfect. That doesn't exist as far as I understand it. So when we go through rough patches, figuring out how to keep our emotions in a good place, because you might see other traders trading a market well that you are getting destroyed in. And that tends to erode confidence. And then somehow stuff that you were trading well before because your confidence is eroded is now everything's a disaster. It's like the reverse Midas touch. Just everything wilts and dies. And a lot of that has to do with performance anxiety that I talk about all the time, but it also has to do with resiliency. So the survivor is the one that gets up the last time. And that's not to say you go throw more money in an account and keep trading the way you were trading. The survivor steps back and goes, all right, what'd I do? Okay, what's happening here? Deconstructing what's happening as far as the stress related to the trades that are not turning out well, or the fear of taking trades. So fear of taking those trades because you've had losses can destroy an account just as easily as any other. Hold on just a sec. Please close the door. So the fear of losing that money is as destructive as actually losing money, because it makes you where you have to change the mentality. You have to change how you're thinking about what happened and let the water roll off your back. So if you're continuing to hold on to, I'll use an example from somebody recently that I talked to of you had $25,000 and you had some positions that you sized up into it much too large, and now it's 8,000. If you focus on the $25,000 and how much you've lost, you're going to keep losing it. So for me, through my losses as a newer trader, I kept going back to how much I'd lost and focusing on, I've got to make this back up. I've got to get back. I've got to get back to it. If I could just get to break even and make up these losses. And it created more losses. And everyone that I've talked to, when they focus on the losses, creates more losses. And I'm actually a certified coach in neurolinguistic programming. So a lot of other things in my life. Owned a fitness business, sold recently, and part of that was the brain piece for weight loss. The brain piece for getting into shape, whether it's weight loss or not, there is a huge impact from the most powerful words in any language, which are I am. So if you're saying things like, I just keep making these same mistakes, like, right, focused on the negative stuff, you're going to keep getting the negative stuff. I'm going to go ahead and exit that ES long at 5340. Exit ES long 5340. Let me go ahead and type that. Yep, the one problem with talking, typing, trading, the 3 T's. All right, perfect. Now, no more distractions. So when we think about how much we've lost, it creates a negative loop pattern that is linguistic programming. It's how you talk to yourself. It's the things that you say. The brain doesn't hear the negative part. And I told this story quite a few times, but I'm as we do these mind over matter sessions, I'm not as concerned about repeating it because the stuff is so important. Where the new traders boot camps are new content and different exposures that I wanted my members to have. But thinking about negative programming, think back to when you were a kid. And I don't know, I'm probably a little bit older than most of the people in here, but we had these things called lines. If you got in trouble, you got to write lines. You got your piece of paper. And for me, it was spitwads. I threw spitwads when I was bored at the people that were annoying me. And so I got to write these lines that were, I will not throw spitwads. I will not throw spitwads, right? Over and over to the tune of hundreds of pages. Who knows how many? Believe it or not, I was a slightly rebellious child and didn't have to study, so I was bored. And so then I would just entertain myself with, yeah, anyway. The more I wrote, I will not throw spitwads. If you think about it, even now, I'm like, woo, that was fun. Do it again. Because there's positive reinforcement for me doing something that was entertainment for me. So the brain drops out that negative piece, the not part, and here's I spitwads, right? And there's the happiness. That was probably from when I was 9 or 10, and I still have that much emotional attachment to that. So if you're writing things down like, I will not oversize anymore, I will not double down, whatever it is that you're doing that are your bad habits, you're reinforcing the bad habits. Instead of, oops, hold on just a sec. Okay, there we go. Instead of focusing on the things that you want to produce. So I'll use my trading company as example. I would have people say, I'm just so tired of being fat. I do not want to be fat anymore. And they, would write, because I do mindset coaching sessions for that as well. They would write things like, I am not fat. There's the positive I am phrase. Except just like I and spitwads, it becomes I fat. And then it's a pretty easy jump over to the term fat and happy. And there's the smile because I get to eat my chili cheese fries and life is good. So the positive reinforcement of the negative behavior becomes part of how you're talking to yourself. So if you're in a rough patch, what you need to do is make sure that you go in and set yourself solid rules. No averaging down, that kind of thing. So you want to identify what the patterns of behavior are that are a problem. However, then you're going to go in and write yourself what are considered positive affirmations. And all this stuff comes from a book called Cybernetics. I'm going to have to find the link of it because I'm not thinking of the word right. It's psycho. I was like, there's not two cybers. Cybernetics, written, I think, in the 50s. It's a really old concept that a lot of new processes have adapted to. But if you're one of those people that likes to read where things came from originally, like the original concept, Cybernetics is the name of the game. And I'll get that uploaded into our books library. I do have it somewhere. Got to get my hard drive in gear. So the psychology behind being aware of what the problems are, because you can't just say, and we'll transfer this now to money. You can't just say, I'm rich, I am rich, I am rich. And when you're trying to manifest, that's from The Secret, being wealthy. Because if you're so focused on that and you're not taking the steps that you need to take to be able to make the money, save the money, protect the money, your couch is going to be carried away because your house is going to be taken into bankruptcy because you're just sitting in the corner saying, I am rich, right? You have to take those actions. You have to put in process what the steps are. So is that for some people setting up the rules of, not going to average down? And if you want to look at my staff introduction, I do have a good starting place where you might have some of the things that are important for you. and branch from there, that's totally fine. And if you break those rules, you're not allowed to trade. For me, I put one day, if I broke that rule or a rule or multiple rules, whatever, I don't get to trade tomorrow. If I do it again, when I get to come back and trade that next day. So let's say Monday, I break rules. I don't trade Tuesday. Wednesday, I break more rules. I'm now on trading timeout for a week because I require a lot of pressure. Now, I had to put my own pressure on myself, and it was because of how much money I lost. But that was the only way because I love trading as much now as I did then. I love trading when I was losing money, even though it caused pain. I'm obsessed with charts. I just love them. I dream about them still, which is pretty weird after 22 years, but apparently I'll be able to trade for a very long time. And so for me to not be able to trade was way more pain than following my rules. So installing that pain switch of, dang it, if I did it when I came back after that week, it was a month and I would die for a month. I never made it to a month. I did get timed out a couple weeks. I had to originally start it with having somebody else enforce it. So I had someone who would change the passcode on my trading brokerages. So I was able to be honest enough to say I broke this rule. So I would just do a daily recap. And those of you guys that have heard me talk about this for a long time, I call them the Rockefeller habits. So what did I do well? What did I struggle with? And what was the solution? So those three things I recap my professional day, my trading day. So three things. What did I do well? What did I struggle with? And did I find a solution? And if I don't find a solution, I'm going to go looking for it. But that at least lets you kind of see where you are mentally. And so I would answer those questions. And if what did I struggle with, if one of those was I broke my rules again, then that person would lock me out of my trading account. And that person was my husband because I lost so much money and the way, it created a lot of stress on a young, newly married couple to have, at that point we had a young son and it was a mess. So that stress created, I think most of the time, most people would have just said, you're done trading, right? You lost too much money. It was insurance money, so it wasn't like our life savings or anything, but it would have changed our future pretty dramatically for it to not have been lost. Now, I wouldn't have learned to trade like I can now. So, I don't really regret it because it took me on this journey, this process that has created a very significantly enjoyable life. I'll just put it that way. But in order to convince my husband that it was a good idea for me to put one more penny in the market, the agreement was, how did this happen? What rules were broken? And for anybody who knows us personally, I'm the big personality. I'm the pushy A type, and he's mellow and even and cool-headed and like complete opposite, which, good partnerships are often like that. You can't have two people who are the high energy, aggressive driving personality. And so we'd been married for quite a while at that point, 7 or 8 years. I got married fairly young at 19. And so we had enough history that I respected him, he respected me, even though massive mistakes were made, to at least be honest and say, I broke my rules. So he just changed the password. And that was enough balance for me because I had found a way to earn the right back to be trading again after making massive repeated mistakes that I didn't tell him about for a very long time, right? So there's all this, that's really been the primary thing we've ever had trouble with, was me not participating well in that communication. And aside from that, that's it. So what I want you to do is I want you to find somebody, if you're in a rough patch, that you will allow to listen to you when you say you've made mistakes and let them lock you out if you can't do it yourself. I eventually got where I'm like, well, I'm treading water now. I'm at break even or slightly profitable. the last thing I want to do. And I would fall back into the patterns. But in that break even and slightly profitable year, it was significantly different. And I was able to switch around and start managing that. It took a long time. So find somebody that isn't going to be too critical, because usually what you're going to hear from a spouse is, you're never touching charts again. What are you doing? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, whatever. and it's over, or you end up divorced. So maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a sister, a brother, I don't care. But if there's somebody that you trust to be able to lock you out, because if you give somebody your password, they can also empty your account out, just to be careful. So rough patch, that's my rough patch story. Shadow, what was your rough patch? Well, I've had a lot of them in between, but that's my big one.
Yeah, no, I've had some ups and downs, and each rough patch has its own hurdle to get over, and I've done something similar where I had my wife. I would show my wife the broker statement for the day, and if I broke my trading rules, then she would change the password,
Yeah. Oh,
and
cool.
I couldn't trade the next day. And I did that for about a month, and my problem is my fear. I mean, my greed comes from a hero complexity,
Right.
where I want to be the family breadwinner and savior, and you know, and so and it stems even deeper than that, like them being proud of me and stuff like that, and then showing those statements every day, my rules, and then seeing uh, you know, feeling the shame and disappointment, uh, help curb that greed, because I wanted them to be proud of me, and then as I'm showing this to them, it made me feel shameful and made me realize that this is not the integrity I want to be showing.
Yep. I love it.
And then there's been a few other things here and there that I've done, but I think that's a huge one, is just finding that accountability partner.
And
But even
it
then,
can't be a spouse a
it
lot of
helps.
times, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I love it.
it definitely helps if the person knows trading. So, and that's why I came to Bull Trades, or the other server, um, was accountability, and then I was working on my psychology. So, but the people around you, they when you start talking trading, you get that deer in the head, and
Oh yeah, it's trouble. It was pretty challenging, because I actually had to teach him some of the stuff so that he could understand it. Because otherwise, he's like, "You're speaking a foreign language to me, and I'm not real interested." He's like, "I don't really want to trade, but I need to understand why in the hell you would think that was right." And I think that's actually why I was brought into the previous server, is because my specialty is trading psychology, and that was like the turnaround for me. How I actually made it through was changing the head game.
yeah, yeah, and each of those things, they lead to other things, like that there led me to realize, you know what, I just can't control myself. Like when I'm in a trade, I think it's going to go higher. My bias becomes so strong, and by that evolved me into just sticking to a very strict risk management. Where, all right, if I'm doing 4 points right now, so I only move in 4 point increments, you know,
Right.
and it's very rare you'll see me break outside of that 4 points or 3 points, whatever I'm using. And even then, like I'll only move my stop loss up 4 points at a time, and or take profit at 4 points at a time. And I'll stand from that, because just the realization, like I just can't help myself. Like when I look at the chart, I'm like, oh, it can keep going, it can keep going.
For sure. It's
And
optimism. It's a beautiful trait to have, that optimism, but
yeah,
with good guardrails around
but
it.
yeah, but then it would come down to your break even, and then you're like, oh, it's just wiggling, and then it comes down to where your mental stop loss was at. You're like, oh, it's okay, and then it goes past your stop loss, and you start looking for reasons for it to get out at break even. Then it gets to break even, and then you sit there and like, okay, now it's going to, and it comes all the way back, way past what it was before, and then the reality was is you were up, 30 60% on a contract, now you're down 80% on a
Right.
contract, option contract. So I didn't have this problem with the futures because I already had it established, but on options, that's where I had problems. So
And there is some
yeah,
additional, because of theta decay and things like that, that definitely
yeah,
can complicate the emotions that kick up as far as that goes. Because the trade thesis was right, but it got theta decayed. And talking about that in market talk earlier, I'm not trading 0-day SPY right now very much because of where we are in the market. That theta decay will wreck people. And then once you already had control, now you're still having trouble. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon all the way around. Do
yep.
your kids
And,
have any interest in trading? How involved are they in just watching all of that?
one son, but the older ones, he don't care. One of them he's interested, and the other ones are pretty young, and they see me and they watch and stuff, but they still haven't quite grasped what it exactly is yet. So
Yeah.
because there's a pretty big gap. Um, the two older boys they're almost adults now, and then it goes all the way down to the next youngest at 8 years old. So
Gotcha. There's a big space. Okay. Nice. Yeah.
yeah,
Mine are definitely not anywhere near as interested as I am. And maybe mine are 19 and 22 and they understand how to chart and they do some trading, but they're not like I am where it's the same. It's kind of funny. The same thing with horses. I grew up with horses. I am horse obsessed. It's never gone away, even when we didn't have them. So we got back to having them and taught my kids to ride. They can ride better than most people that I've met, except for professional riders, and they can chart better than a lot of people that I've seen, but they don't love it. And that's one of the keys is if you're finding yourself stressed and not loving it, no amount of push. I can't make them go on a horse ride with me. I can't make them be like, "Do you understand that you could be making money on the side?" They do understand that. For them, it's not their big focus. And maybe it's because
yeah.
of my trauma of all the loss that I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just my personality, but you have to be careful
For
not to push
me,
it.
yeah, for sure. And for me, I focus more on with my children on just the educational aspect of like indexes and like
Yeah,
vanguards and stuff, and preparing them in the future. Not so much as a day trader because I think that's more of a choice
right.
and a passion, but just being money smart. Like they already have their own. I put me in a vanguard, so
That was my main
um,
focus is that financial education because I did not have it
yeah,
at all. There was no talk
absolutely,
of, budgeting and saving money and being responsible in retirement. None of that. It did not exist in my household. And I was like, all this stuff that I had to learn in hindsight, a lot of my struggle would have been a lot less if I understood budgets and all of that. So we started with something called Mom Bucks, and they were actually family bucks. It came from the Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of concept. So we did family bucks where they could earn money to be able to go spend, which was the start of their budgeting. And so we really just focused on money management and responsibility of, you put some money aside to play, you put some money aside for what I call the peace of mind account. Everybody else calls it the rainy day. I'm not looking forward to rainy days. I want to have peace of mind if rough spots come. So that's the savings. And it's interesting because that was the main focus. And I did think that they were going to get more into trading, and they might, you just never know. But exposing them to those concepts, you never know what's going to come around in the future. And that's one of the reasons from a fulfillment perspective why I do this is because I wish these are all the things I wish somebody would have told me. And maybe I would have listened, maybe I wouldn't have, but I feel like to do right by what I learned, I need to share it with other people.
yep.
All right. Well, rough patches filled up our half hour, so we're going to talk about skill versus luck next week and dealing with setbacks a little bit more in depth. But I appreciate you guys coming to hang out and being here in the server with us. It's awesome to see all the familiar faces and some new faces as we're growing. We're coming up on our 1 month anniversary of Market Mastermind, and we're happy to have you here.
Same. I appreciate you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Shadow. And we'll catch you guys in voice in just a little bit.